to open the nut. The spanner cannot open the nut by itself. It is me to know how to open the nut using a spanner and knowing which direction should I turn for the nut to open. At the end goal is the nut to be opened. So if you look at that analogy, there's still a human play in the integration of AI. So that's what I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Dr. Maina. And Dr. Christine, when it comes to the educators themselves, and last week I think we determined that educators also need educating because all these concepts are still very new, especially in the Kenyan and the African setting. And so, how do we ensure that our educators are equipped for them to be able to transfer that knowledge? Talk about integrating AI, and how are we going to be able to ensure that they have those, those AI skills? They know the tools, they know what application to go and use, when to go and where to go and get it, all those different soft skills, if I might call them technological soft skills, that these teachers require for them to be able to transfer that knowledge to students. How can we empower our educators as well?
To begin with, we have to work on the mindset of the educators themselves, because of what Dr. Maina has said. I think it's more of ignorance, imagining that AI is going to take over the role of educators. But it is important to understand that AI in education can be seen as a facilitator that can support the implementation of various educational approaches, including CBC. AI technologies can personalize learning experiences. AI can provide real-time feedback and also identify areas where students may need additional support by enhancing the learning process. And if the educators are made to understand this through capacity building, because in essence, it is now through capacity building that they can get the right mindset to accept, to involve AI while enhancing the aspects of CBC. Since AI can analyze, just like Dr. Maina said, it can analyze quickly large amount of data to inform curriculum development, adapt learning content to meet individual needs, and even predict future learning outcomes based on what is current or the performance at the moment. And so when discussing the educators and how they can embrace AI versus CBC, it might be more productive to frame the conversation around how AI can support and enhance CBC approach rather than viewing and opposing or mutually looking at them as exclusive entities. Probably the educators need to know that AI can tailor the learning experience to individual students' needs, their strengths and weaknesses, and also align well with the CBC's focus on mastering the competencies as well as the skills at individual level. So if the educators are made to understand this, as well as the fact that AI-driven platforms can provide learners with access to educational resources at any time and anywhere, this can help in implementing CBC in diverse and remote settings. Because at the moment, Kenya is struggling with having CBC get the right perspective in some parts of the country because of access. And so if the educators are made to understand that AI can provide a solution to this kind of a challenge, then they will be positive and they will want to learn how to integrate AI in CBC.
Thank you so much. And still on educators, Dr. Maina, when it comes to the pedagogical, I struggle with this word all the time. I am sorry. It's the pedagogy. I think that's the proper way to say it. So when it comes to the pedagogical implications of integrating AI into education, how would you say AI is going to influence teaching methodologies and instructional practices? Are the teachers going to, as you had mentioned earlier on, the teachers should not be reliant on AI. It's simply a tool. So how do you foresee that affecting how teachers teach and how they plan their lessons, how they structure their instructions, and how they also develop curriculums? How do you think those factors are going to be affected?
Thank you very much. And I'll quote Dr. Christine that attitude should be the first port of call. And I'll also quote you that they need to appreciate that this is a tool which is now facilitating our curriculum instructional design. Because when you're doing curriculum instructional design, we have what is prescribed by Kenya Institute of Curriculum Development. And that is a broader perspective that learners of grade 3 should be able to demonstrate this competency. But as the teacher in their class, I now need to contextualize that curriculum so that it makes meaning to my student and the context where they are. And therefore, AI can be something which one gives me assessment and feedback of my students' performance, as Dr. Christina said, so that I know their entry level to this unit. Then I go to the next step where I will use it to access resources which are now responsive to what I've got as my students' levels. So that is the second level curriculum design. Then the third level is now, how do I design learning experiences which will, one, match the learning styles of my students, two, be rigorous enough so that the students are learning. They're not just consuming, but they are prosumers. And then how will I assess them to know if, one, they have mastered the content, two, they have enhanced their competency, three, they have enriched or caught a value which is supposed to be caught for that particular level. So it is now becoming like a lever which works alongside the teacher to make them efficient, because they are now no longer teaching mathematics. They are now no longer teaching grade 3, but they are now teaching 31 learners in grade 3. So that diversity increases the demand and the rigor of what is required to be done, so that all learners in that class can be, their individual needs can be met. So you have seen most of the current traditional practice, we teach to the middle. So you find the gifted and talented students suffering, and then we call these other students time takers because we are not able to meet their needs, because at our level as humans, we have limitation of data capture and data analysis. But if we can be able to now get this assistant who is going to give us real-time data at the end of the lesson, at the end of the activity, I can be told Dr. Christine is at that level, Joy is that level, mine is this level, meaning that as I'm designing the next lesson, I am designing to move each of these learners from one level to the other, but not the whole class in assumption that they are the same level. So issue of assessment and feedback, issues of resources, and also issues of predictive analytics. Because like now, we have some schools whereby they take data along many years, they can tell a student who is about to fail very early in the time, so they can respond, they can have remedial lesson to such performances, because it has been predictive over time that if you see this kind of performance, then it is going downward. So unless you act early, because most of the time we have a problem of we act too late and then we condemn the learner. Yet if the learning style, the access to resources was changed in good time, this learner would have been successful. All learners should be successful in their own ways and not compared with each other. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Dr. Maina. And I think I'll go to Dr. Christine. When it comes to still empowering educators, and I think this now goes to their career, how can we use AI and digital learning ecosystem to support continuous professional development for our educators? And probably this also ties in with how we can grow their skills as far as using technological tools is concerned. But then how can we ensure their professional development as well? And Dr. Maina, I think you can touch in on that as well. Thaddeus, thank you so much for joining us in the conversation. Makia, I see you as well. I'm coming to you guys shortly. But in the meantime, Dr. Christine, how can we empower our educators and their professional development?
Well, when talking about empowering our educators on AI, it is important to look at the ethical considerations that are included when it comes to AI, especially transparency of AI algorithms, protecting students' privacy and avoiding bias in AI-driven decisions, so that the teachers are now not going to allow AI to replace their work. As in, they should take AI as a tool and not as in to take the role of the teacher completely. For students, digital literacy and understanding AI's role in learning are really very essential. And so capacity building, as I said, for the teachers is really critical and of essence when it comes to empowering them to make use of AI. And it is also important for the teachers to get to understand what artificial intelligence is. Because when we talk about artificial intelligence, most people tend to think that artificial intelligence is simply things to do with like chat GPT and the like. But artificial intelligence is more of what we've also been using, not knowing that it is artificial intelligence. Like when you tell somebody, go Google, who is Google? That is artificial intelligence. So the educators need to be educated about AI's potential and limitations as well. So workshops and trainings should be organized to educate them on how AI works, its potential benefits in educational settings, and its limitations. And thus understanding that AI is a tool designed to enhance rather than replace human instruction can alleviate some of the fears and misconceptions that teachers have. It is also important to leverage on success stories, share case studies and examples where AI has successfully complemented CBC, highlighting improved students' outcomes, personalized learning experiences, and efficiency in assessing competencies. For instance, if you go to developed countries, like just to mention that at the moment I'm taking some course in one of the universities in Canada, and AI has been embraced in the sense that the students are given an opportunity to use AI, including ChatGPT, but they are sensitized on how to go about it. So that the creativity that education is, or rather the competencies that they are supposed to acquire through learning are not lost. And so the students know how to factor in AI to enhance their learning and also improve results as they continue learning. It's also important to involve educators in the integration process, involving them in the process of integrating AI into the curriculum. This can include input on selected AI tools, designing learning experiences, and evaluating outcomes. This will maybe give them a sense of ownership and control over the use of AI, that it can replace them and thus reduce resistance. We should also provide feedback mechanisms by establishing channels for educators to provide ongoing feedback on AI tools and their impact on teaching and learning, since this can help in adjusting strategies to better meet the needs of the educators as well as the students. Another thing we need to do is to demonstrate AI as a supportive tool for competency development. Offer live demonstrations of AI in action, showing how it can provide personalized feedback, identify learning gaps, and also suggest resources that can align with the competencies being targeted. And maybe another thing I need to talk about the educators and their professional learning is to address ethical and privacy concerns. It is important to provide clear guidelines and training on ethical issues related to AI, including bias, data privacy, and transparency. And by so doing, reassuring educators that student privacy and ethical considerations are taken seriously can mitigate some of the concerns that are coming up in terms of AI versus educational versus CBC. I don't know if I have addressed the concern as you wanted it addressed.
Yes, yes, you have. Dr. Mine, I don't know if you have something to say on that. You can add on to what Dr. Christine has said. Maybe 1 minute or so that I can jump to Thaddeus and Makia to comment on some of the practical tools that we can actually implement in AI. Dr. Maina.
Thank you very much. For educators, we do appraisal, we collect a lot of data, we have their performance record, we have their results. What do we do with all those data? We can't analyze all the data, but when you use AI, it can be able to identify the needs of a particular educator. It can do skills assessment, as Dr. Christina said, and then identify the gap. So that is where it comes strong in terms of analyzing the findings and now being able to suggest Dr. Maina needs this kind of skill set if he's supposed to be at that level. The other thing is about virtual coaching and mentorship, because we cannot be able to have a one-to-one with AI. It is building a very big database of different things. Therefore, it can be able to offer virtual coaching and mentorship for different areas. But we also need to be careful, and I'm happy that those people are going to share some of the resources, because AI is limited in terms of what has it access, what other database can it access. So the more we use it, the more we make it smarter, because we keep on feeding it with different prompts, different requirements, and it increases in its algorithm as it searches for more information. So it's a tool which continue. I watched a small video whereby two AIs were having a chat, and it was so interesting to see two bots having a very nice discussion about what they do. The only thing they lack is emotions, but they can access a lot of data. So that is what I'll add, but Dr. Christina has covered it very, very comprehensively in terms of how AI can be used to analyze skill gap, but also there are some of the inherent or innate giftedness or talented which educators have. But AI, through tracking what the teacher is doing, the results they are producing, can be able to profile and say, Dr. Maina, you are a good orator, then you need to build on this skill. So that can also be another way of creating growth professional pathway for educators. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Maina. And I really love that Dr. Christine is very insistent on the ethical aspects of AI integration into education. And we are going to come to that. We will talk about ethical aspects of it all and even governance. And Dr. Christine will circle back to that. So in the meantime, I really want to find out from Makia. Makia, I know you are an IT specialist. I want to find out from you, what would you say are some of the technologies that we have actually implemented in the education sector, whether it's globally or within Kenya or Africa? What are some of the tools that we have actually implemented, and what have we seen? What are the results that we have seen from implementing these things? And what are actually some practical tools that we can also pick up in as far as integration of AI into education is concerned?
Jade and Yonda, thank you for having me. I won't really say I probably know the tools that are actually used in the education piece, because, as you say, they come from tech, and maybe most of the tools we use never really educational in nature. But one thing I can actually get to say, though, before I even answer that question, and I'm happy that Dr. Mina's elaborated here, and Dr. Christine, at the end of the day, as they've said, AI is a tool, and AI would never replace teachers in some way. Those certain aspects might actually probably be there, because what AI breathes on is data, and that data is actually existing. And the space you're actually in right now is we're trying to look at spaces where we're actually able to let AI sort of build its own content and material. That would be the height of intelligence when you're actually looking at some of these programs. So probably it's not gotten there yet. What most people actually interacting with right now is generative AI, the chat GPTs, Perplexity, and all these other tools that actually get to feed you with the information when you prompt and ask certain questions. Now, that in itself does not replace education, because you just have a prompt that you put in a tool that gives you access to information. So what AI does is it actually goes to already existing data that has been produced by human beings, maybe in websites, in research papers, in whatever areas, and it's actually able to pull all that data into one place. So it's just sort of a Google as such that is perhaps more enhanced and targeted to get you more specific answers. And again, the other thing for educators to actually get to look at what will be the accuracy of using some of these tools, because you have the Wikipedias of these world, you have all other sources of information out there. So if educators are to get into AI and use it, because I know countries like Singapore, South Korea actually get to use it, you'll find tools like Wolfram Alpha that are used specifically for STEM, that is mathematics, science, and technology, where you'd have certain exams set. Students are actually able to answer those questions, and it's also able to see on based how you answer certain questions, how intelligent. Because as a teacher, you can actually do the hard work. You can have a test, have your samples, cluster students, and check word by word how do they respond to certain questions. And if they answer questions to a given degree, then you'd understand this is where they're coming from. So their level of thinking is more aligned towards these side of things. You can actually give a discuss question, for example, as an input, and you'd have one who would answer more in a lawyer's language. You'd have one who would answer it in a more scientific way. You'd have another student who would answer it in a more artistic way. Same question, discuss, 20 marks. Let's just give it a grade. So when you do that, you actually have 5 sets of answering that actually gives you a bit of insight of where your student is. So if you set a question, for example, and you have your student answer it in a more artistic way, perhaps you start having the impression this student is more endowed on matters art. If you have one who would want to describe it in a more philosophical way, others would actually want to give it, the textbook scientific definition. So it gives a bit of insight. So tools like AI can be able to go through a list of material and actually be able to, pick and classify, some of these content and data, and actually give you a bit of insight as a teacher. So again, I agree to people who say that AI is a tool, but at the end of the day, the quality of education that is being given to a child using some of these tools. Okay, I know there are probably a couple of tools that could be used, but for me, I think because I'm more into math and science, I think Wolfram Alpha is definitely a good tool that is actually probably used. I don't know to what I don't have data to what extent most educators get to use it. So these are some of the things that AI can help us do. So instead of spending a lot of hours trying to figure out and get this data, it's actually able to get it. So A good instance, for example, sorry?
Sorry, Michael. Sorry to jump in. I think I will help you with the tools aspect and just introduce Thaddeus because I know he has a bit more grasp as far as the tools that have been implemented in the education sector. Or rather, some of the tools that we are looking to implement in the education sector. But Maki, I'll definitely circle back to you, and you can give us more insight as to what educators can do. Thaddeus, what are some of these tools that educators can actually start to learn about and start implementing in the classroom?
Well, thank you. I hope it's my turn. And but even before I delve into the tools, I have, of course, I have a bit of heart, like an academician, a researcher, and even an interest in the area of digital space as a computer scientist, just to speak. I want just to say that what we should be selling now, especially, and this is the work of the expertise in artificial intelligence, is just to tell our people, who are the consumers, that they should not panic, because we are just, in a way, trying to make this artificial intelligence term to look like something that is coming to take space that we are doing in existence physically. So what do I mean? I want us to understand that artificial intelligence is an enabler, and all factors kept constant. In other words, the data privacy, what kind of data is these algorithms or these tools that we are speaking about is coming to harvest from us. But in simple terms, I want us to say that artificial intelligence itself is trying to emulate the human thinking. That human thinking is a specialist, is a teacher somewhere for YK12. It's just a higher level learning teacher somewhere. So what I want us just to imagine is that we have a physical learning environment and we need an enabler to make our work easier. And that is what technology is all about. So it is an enabler before even we delve into all these things. So I just say, what we need is that, do we even know what I'm thinking or I will be thinking tomorrow? Not at all. So these tools in technology have not come to replace what is existing. So they are not here to replace the human space. No, our human cognitive architecture keeps on growing, and it's in amorphous in a way we don't, psychologically, we cannot say this is how it is. So let's not face the AI, let the AI faces and try to learn from us. That's what's happening. So for this, the specialists, the professionals in this space, we should first relax and wait from the professionals in this area by asking these very nitty-gritty and really big questions from this space. If you are not a specialist in this technology, ask, what is this before I do these things? And from even the professional perspective, these tools, and that's why we say, even before you harvest any information from these consumers we call the novice, those people who are not tech savvy or a professional in technology, we need to provide this in a vivid way. So what do I want to say in AI versus CBC? So even before I say of the tools, because tools even right now, in the next 20 minutes, we'll have a new tool. We can only talk about the tools that we can see and try to assess where they can enable us. But what I'm trying to say is this. The only thing that should drive artificial intelligence is the philosophy of, for example, learning, the theories that do exist, the frameworks that we do hold, that do exist and do propel the learning. Like, for example, if we say that the main goal of learning is to have knowledge in a domain of knowledge for higher learning. And for example, for competence-based, we just simply say that we would wish to have a learner being competent in a certain area for why maybe K-12. Now, what do we need in between is an enabler. And that's why I say if you have a digital space, then we need to understand the characteristics of this learner. And the characteristics of this learner are very well from the philosophy and the theories. We say about the learning styles, and we talk about the cognitive theory, for example, how much that learner can absorb. And in the physical environment, as we speak, as teachers in the physical class, at that point, we can manage these two characteristics of the learner. And that's very clear. We can't just see the learning styles of the learner and try to adjust in the physical class. We give them breaks, we give them some aids, we give them some jokes, we do some songs, we do some lyrics, we support, or what we call, we scaffold learning. And again, we can even say, at this time, this learner is tired. So the cognitive architecture for the learner, we can see the behavior. So what do? We stop and give breaks. Now, what technology comes to do, for example, as the interface, is to emulate this kind of behavior of the learner and behavior of the teacher. So if we are providing the content, that would what we call the instructional content, the AI tool that we speak about should be there like a watchdog, just trying to look at what are these behaviors of the learner that we can map to, for example, the learning style and cognitive characteristics. So that, for example, if it's an e-learning interface or a digital interface, then the AI should recommend for a scaffold to support. A scaffold could, like, for example, if we were having a storybook reading, a given page of a storybook would have a graphic showing how character X went to the spring to fetch some water. So we see some bucket. What would happen in the digital space is that we see, if we provide this intervention, because we can harvest the data in real time of the learner, the way the learner interacts with the interface, then we can provide such kind of support. The same way, that support can be feed forward or feedback. A feedback to the teacher to say, how do you even change this kind of instructional support? So what I want to speak is, we should not panic about technology, especially in the continent of Africa, Kenya, to say, we need to relax and have a framework. And that's what I'm speaking to, that point of, can we, and actually this one has to be taken, and it's not been taken seriously as we speak, because I know the partakers of this from the physical learning are always fearing that would have machines and robotics standing before and taking their space of being teachers. No, that is not what is going to happen. We need to think about how do we involve really technical tools like artificial intelligence in our curriculum. So that speaks to, we need to change our curriculum. But our curriculum should be changed based on what I'm talking about, from the theories and the philosophies that do exist. So that simply means the existing teachers still hold a pivotal area of these discussions. So when now you start saying about the tools that we need to do, these tools must be developed based on what you are telling them, based on these theories, based on these philosophies. And that's what's supposed to happen. So that when we say, for example, during the COVID-19 pandemic, we used a lot what we call Google Teams a lot. And then we could just talk and speak and give all these times. That Teams as a tool is trying to be even a bit high AI enabled, so that it can even take the minutes of a meeting, so that you don't just write down as the screens are moving. That's what we're saying. As in, from what I'm speaking right now, if we were to use Teams, if we're using X as we speak, or the formerly called Twitter, then we could be having what we call the minute taking. So there's a secretary who's like a AI agent within the software that could take all these notes and make them in a way that we say could be presented at meetings. So what I want to speak on is that it's not only tools that would speak and say, oh, okay, we speak about these tools, so tomorrow let's pick them and start using them. No, that is not the case. The case is we go back to the instructional.
Thaddeus, I can't hear you. Can anybody hear Thaddeus? Grace, can you hear him?
I think we lost him for a while, but he has brought about some few issues that we'll need to look at. I'm hoping we can circle back to Dr. Miner where he can come in and we can start looking at in one way or the other. Yes, we have the educators; they need to be educated. That one we have accepted, and Dr. Christine has even given us different ways in which we are supposed to do that, the workshops and all that. But then, how are we able to overcome the biasness? Now, here, when it comes to AI, it has bias, and even as human beings, we have bias. Dr. Miner, how do you see us working through this? Kindly.
One of the core competency in CBC is critical thinking and problem solving. And if you unpack critical thinking and problem solving, the first ability is multiple perspective. The second ability is accessing evidence. The third ability is deep structures. And the fourth ability is non-routine practices. So if we are to equip our learners or we are to enhance these four abilities, then they will be able to ensure that the kind of tools they use, because even we just had another meeting and we are saying we need to challenge the people who are designing these tools to ensure that they consider ethical practice and also biasness. And I'm happy to say that most of these AI tools, they'll tell you that this is a perspective I'm giving you, but you can adjust it depending on your needs. Meaning that the 9 and the 6 is the same number, but it depends on where you are standing from. So if we are to equip our learners with that skill set of knowing that if you give prompt A, it will give you one perspective as a response to the same issue. And then you can you can tweak the prompt and it gives you another perspective. So you will be having an opportunity to have a multiple perspective to the same issue so that you can now make your own meaning on how do you consume what you are getting based on your needs. So it's a matter of equipping the consumers of what is generated by AI to be able to have open-mindedness, have the issue of multiple perspective, and key is accessing evidence. Because every statement which is saying and is not backed by peer-reviewed evidence, then it doesn't stand. So it's a matter of when a teacher is looking for a resource, maybe they want to look at the model of a hat. I can give you a model of a hat because the model of the hat had misconception back then, even before AI came. People could download a video of how the hat works. But then that model, when it was showing how the blood vessels are moving through, blood is moving across the different chambers, it was creating a misconception on the concept of how the heart works. And I like what Tadia says, that bottom line is the learning experiences. What are the expectations of the learning? So that when you are looking for information, you need to counter check. Is it responding to the learning needs as required? And if not, is there something which you need to scaffold to make it more clearer than what is required? So it's not just a postal model. We are not just accessing information, but as the information that we're accessing, as teachers, we should be able to analyze that information at the level of need. What we are getting, is it what we need? And if it's not, can we prompt it differently so that we can get what we need? And what we need, is it biased? How many sources are we getting from? And what is the perspective of what we are getting? So that is the kind, guess that's the kind of level of competency as teachers we need, the critical thinking and problem solving, so that any information we access, we ask ourselves, who is saying this? And that's why even when I'm working with students, I told them, okay, Wikipedia is not advisable because it's not peer reviewed, it's not challenged, and anybody can go there and update it. So that's the kind of data agency, digital agency, which our teachers need so that they can guard themselves the way they consume the information they're accessing. Because with AI now, we have an avalanche of information. We have infoglut. So how do you cipher? How do you filter and ensure that you are getting exactly what you want and it is not biased, but it is responding to the needs. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Maynard. Grace, I don't know if you have something, a follow-up question or a comment? All right. So Thaddeus, you were telling us about the tools. I think I'll let you go before we cover some of the ethical considerations that we need to take into place. And also, we haven't really talked about the student-centered aspect of this. So we need to come back to that. And I love that Dr. Maina mentioned the students and how he's been interacting with them. We're going to come back and talk about the benefits of AI and integrating it into CBC and how that's beneficial for the students themselves. Thaddeus?
Yes, please. Oh, yeah. I don't know. Maybe I lost something happened on the way. But what I'm saying on the tools that is happening, I need to talk about two aspects on this here. The tools that we do have, as Dr. Maina is speaking about, there are avalanche of tools that we have there. We'll even ask ourselves, are these tools verified? That's one thing, because you have a freedom of choice of the tools that you can use that are not tools that are tailored for either education or in the social platforms. Sometimes we mix both. And that's what I was saying. The only tools that do exist right now as we speak are the tools that enable a teacher and a learner to either a teacher see a learner if they so wish, and the learner see the teacher so wish. For example, the teams that we are using, and even, for example, have a conversation. That's okay. We have so many of them. Like I don't want to mention they come on going again. So it means that it depends, because these tools are on business. That's what I'm saying. So we can always develop our tools that even suit us. But what is there on the market is global, and it depends with how even these tools are being advertised. You know, there are a lot of things into this space of technology. But what I want to speak on is, can we have inbuilt tools that are sitting in place of the learner and the teacher? And like, for example, talking about digital space, the tool is not what you download and just place on your mobile phone or so. It could be you're just seamlessly logging in or even accessing an interface. In between there's an artificial intelligence tool. That's what I'm saying. We ought not to be mentioning about these tools as we go along, but the only thing is that these tools are enablers to achieve their goals. So the only thing that we do want to say is that are the learning objectives as per the theories and philosophies of learning achieved through these enablers of AI as the tools? That's what we need to discuss. And that's what I'm saying. And maybe we're going to discuss in a short while, but I want just to say, like currently there's a research we are trying to do that just tries to speak on the same thing, that what we have currently, and I have to speak this with confidence, not only in Kenya, but in the whole world, we don't have a platform that we do say that is an e-learning platform or is an online platform that follows what we call maybe CBC or what simply we call learning online. What we have are tools that are enablers. So we need to go back as teachers to the drawing board and say, what does learning entail? What are the behaviors? And that's why you say only two characteristics, for example, the learning styles of the learner and also the cognitive architecture of the learner. The learner gets loaded with this. So can the interface enable us to collect those behaviors? Yes, it can. And that is what we need to do. So what do? We go back to the curriculum, instruction design, change it, then let the machines do their work, as we always inform them that this thing has changed. It changes very fast, because remember, technology is there for efficiency purposes. So what I want to say is that there are so many tools on this space that we can use. Like, for example, the tools that do help us to communicate as we are just communicating right now. There are even others. Even X is a tool that can be used for learning. Like right now we are learning so that we can use it somewhere else. So we cannot just say this one is good for this one is good for the other one. The only thing we say that has professionals gone through these tools and verified them that they don't have breaches like data privacy breaches and all other things. Because right now as we speak, most of the tools can even make our learners vulnerable, which is the sure case, but we say we have also professionals working around the clock to ensure that some other tools. And that's why you realize, for example, in China, there are some tools that you can't install there. They have their own inbuilt tools, like WhatsApp in China is not there. They have developed their own WeChat, right? And many other Google applications don't run in China, but China is a giant of technology. So what do we speak on the same? We need to understand our continent, understand our country, and let's not chase technology, but let's have frameworks and learn from the giants, but we also domesticate our own technology. That's what I want to speak. So there are so many tools, but I don't want just to list, because these tools, most of them, they're in business. Yes, we can use them as enablers. I think that one speaks on the same, my take.
Thank you so much for that. And I think that makes perfect sense, Thaddeus. That makes a lot of sense. But just before I move on to Dr. Christine and we start talking about the ethical side of this, what would you say is what is the best way to promote digital literacy and responsible use of AI among students? And how can we empower them to be ethical users of AI technologies?
Thank you so much, Chair. But I want to speak. When you start talking about ethics, I think ethical behavior is not learned, is earned, if I'm not wrong. So we cannot just say that we teach our students, like, for example, if you're using Chat GPT, and even right now we have Edit GPT, which is not much talked, is the latest that is just trying to edit what Chat has given. We cannot just say, fine, use that Chat GPT to write your essay, your composition, for example, and then at the end of the day, please make sure that you digest cognitively and pick the main points from that. No, it doesn't work like that ethically. What happens is that, and this is what I want to leave to even professionals. If we want to provide these tools and that's why I say these technological tools are enablers to do our work. So even these learners themselves, there's no need of even them knowing that when they're interacting with the machine at this level, if grade 2, there is something called ChatGPT for them to use at that level. That's what I might take, right? Let it be an enabler of the same. And even the way, and that's why I say we domesticate these issues, so that ChatGPT could be running somewhere as an interface between the learner and the teacher, such that you can't teach ethics and ethical behavior. It comes voluntarily, and people change, and that's why we have even crime, even if others profess to be ethical. So what we just simply say is that let's poke holes to technology for us who do understand it, and advise us, and hey, don't come into our privacy. Can we have this technology without, for example, coming into our privacy, enabling me to do A, B, C, D, such that you let the professionals provide that tool, and you get that tool, not necessarily saying, hey, there's a tool here that you can use to have a shortcut with, so that if you have, for example, like we've been having a conference the whole day today, and most of the questions that were being asked in that conference, we used ChatGPT to answer such questions. Then we're asking ourselves, then was there a real need of having a speaker in that meeting? Oh, yes. You see, ChatGPT is not everything. It's not human, okay? It has just learned 5 seconds ago about that question. And then it goes on learning. Tomorrow, the speaker could be changing on the way it looks, on the weather and how different things. So I'm saying it keeps on learning on how we behave, right? So the tools should be integrated in learning, yes, as enablers for learning and teaching, but not shying off. And I remember, just to not to take a lot of time, like I remember one of my speakers today from South Africa spoke something and said, it's like you trying to say, you cannot buy a laptop for your 5-year-old kid or so, because you are fearing the internet is providing a lot of stuff that could be so much unethical before you're young. But what happens if that child is 9, 10 years? It could be a lifetime disastrous for that child that she doesn't understand the use of technology, while others are ahead of the technology. So technology is not bad. These tools are not bad. Let's have the right frameworks in place that we can fuse, and we have theories and frameworks in place that inform what the learner ought to know and what the teacher ought to provide. Feed forward, feed backward. So we cannot just sit here. I cannot, as a scientist or academia or a professional in IT, I cannot conclusively or even authoritatively tell you that, you know what, go use ChatGPT for this learning. No, I can only say it's a technology, but let it be an enabler. So that means we can even change it to enable our learning and our teaching process. Thank you, my tech.
Thank you so much for that, Thaddeus. Dr. Christine, do you agree with what Thaddeus has just told us about ethics and how we cannot teach it? And what would you say are some of the policy and governance or other regulatory frameworks that are in place to ensure the responsible use of AI in education?
Oh, well, before I talk about ethics, let me just say that when recommending AI tools, it is essential to consider the specific competencies that we are targeting in the curriculum. The technological infrastructures that are available, do we have the required technology in our country, for example, and the digital literacy levels for both the educators and the students? Sometimes we will want to expose our educators to AI, and yet their level of acquisition of digital literacy is very low. So the goal is to select tools that not only support competency development, but also enhance engagement, motivation, and the overall learning experience of both the educators and the students. And remember, even as we are talking about embracing AI in CBC or in education, it is important to go back and ask the question, why? Why are we doing this? Because when the why is clear, then the how is easy. And now coming down to the ethical issues, or rather the ethical concerns when it comes to AI integration in CBC, there are quite a number of things that we need to look at. And I don't know if we have policies that are addressing this at the moment. And being that it is a contemporary issue, I think it is important for the policymakers to sit down and analyze all this and come up with policies that can guide this, because we cannot run away from the fact that technology is moving fast, and we have to catch up. We cannot deny the fact that AI is here with us. And as a country, for instance, as a country, Kenya, we need to do something about it. We cannot just ignore and say, oh, now let us not allow people to use it. It is there. The young people know it is there. And how are they going to do it? How are they going to use it? So there is a concern. There is a risk that AI-driven education could focus on rote learning and memorization, neglecting the development of the core competencies we were talking about, like creativity, critical thinking, problem-solving skills, and so on and so forth. And thus, educational AI tools should be designed to promote higher thinking skills, encouraging students to question, to analyze, to create. You know, it is important to look at that. And also there is this concern of over-reliance on AI. It is an ethical issue which could potentially devalue the role of teachers and the human aspects of learning, such as social interaction, which is very, very critical, empathy, feeling for others, and ethical reasoning. And therefore, for the policymakers, AI should be used to complement traditional teaching methods, not to replace them. And that's the role of teachers as facilitators of learning, as mentors, and ethical guides should be emphasized. Talking about policy again on matters ethical, there is also need to have informed consent. Students and parents should be aware of and consent on how AI is being used in educational contexts, particularly regarding data collection and analysis, reports writing. Sometimes students are asked to write reports, they go straight to ChatGPT. ChatGPT writes the report and they give out that, and that is it. The teachers don't know that the students have used ChatGPT. They give them all the marks, and so this is a concern. So transparent communication and obtaining informed consent from students and their guardians are essential before implementing the AI tools that maybe will be considered in an educational setting. And then there is also the risk that the benefits of AI in education could favor students with access to advanced technology, and thus, of course, widening the digital divide. For policy, efforts must be made to ensure equitable access to AI educational tools for all students, including those from underprivileged backgrounds or remote areas, as I had alluded earlier on. And then there is also the aspect of accountability, the aspect of transparency. The decision-making process of AI systems, of course, can be opaque, making it difficult for students and educators to understand how decisions are made. Like you give it a prompt, it gives you an answer. And therefore, there should be transparency on how AI systems operate and make decisions with clear accountability mechanisms in place for when things go wrong. As much as there will be a prompt that you need to look at it again, because this is just a perspective, it is also important to know, to be very transparent, how are you getting this and how can I make use of it? Because now I understand how you've gotten on it, how you've gotten what you've given me. And then there is also the concern, of course, as all of us have talked about, data privacy and security. The use of AI in education involves collection and analysis, as well as storage of large amounts of personal data from students. Of course, including academic performance, their preferences in learning, because once they put in whatever they want to search on, it is kept. And potentially there is sensitive information that is not in the control of the students or the teachers who are using AI. And therefore, when it comes to policy, strict data privacy measures must be implemented to protect students' information, and thus compliance with regulations like in the European Union. I think there is something called the GDPR or something, and other local data protection laws that can be availed is very, very important. So far in the Ministry of Education, I'm not aware. If there is, maybe it is being developed, policies regarding AI. And thus, I think all these ethical considerations are very, very important to be looked into, and policy guidelines developed to safeguard us from all this that is going on in the AI world.
Thank you so much, Dr. Christine. And just before I circle back to Dr. Maina to talk about opportunities for collaboration, Makia, what would you say is the role of developers in ensuring, we are adhering to transparency requests or requirements as far as involving stakeholders in the development of these tools? What are developers doing to ensure that there is no bias or discrimination and that there's accountability? Makia?
Thank you, Shika. So that's a good question, but sadly enough, and I think we've addressed this on some other space when we were with you guys, people who develop some of these tools never have educators or, uh, you know, educationists in mind or children. They always have market on how they're going to make money. So guys who came up with Chat GPT and most of the tools we actually have on AI, they're always looking at the business side of things, profit. So when it comes to, tailor making or having technologies built to actually maybe keep learning safe, or let's say in a student approach, because I don't know of many tools apart from simulators that have actually been built, maybe for guys who are studying medicine. I know probably at early childhood level perhaps a bit of developers actually coming into play, and there's regulation definitely that is sufficiently covering on what can be taught, what sort of data can you be able to collect? What is the credit cover for things like bias? Because most of the policymakers are never technical people, and even if they hire technical people, I mean, it's just one, long and winding process that I feel people who want to tap into this technology from an education space, because most of the tools you can perhaps use are usually for commercial, sort of profit-making ventures. Maybe people want to go into marketing and they're using some of these tools. So if you're trying to use that as an educator and maybe bring this to a class environment, then it's so hard to actually take care of most of those concerns. So again, developers who are building technologies around AI, the biggest challenge is the issue of the algorithms they're actually training. What sort of data they're relying on and collecting, number one. The other thing would be the sort of outputs that most of these probably learners are actually going to get out of it. So I mean, those are some of the areas now. Who's collecting these data? Because if you have a 5-year-old and you're able to collect data in terms of patterns on how they think, answer questions, what time they go on break, and things like that, so it can become problematic. So the whole data privacy thing covers most of those areas. So again, it's sad enough to say this, most policymakers and educators will always play catch up when it comes to technology, and specifically AI. You'd always have the technology go out there, data collected, and then policy would always come later, because no one designs policy to actually regulate on how a tool is going to come out. You have developers who have their own interest, but for educators specifically, they always maybe get some sort of utility from some of these tools. And then you have policymakers, government now start making some sort of regulation, and then they have to go back, maybe put a lot of money to tailor down their tools to be able to meet these requirements. TikTok is a good example. You've had young children consuming lots of data till the US government said, you know what, let's put some sort of restrictions when you have kids. So they start building that capability. So again, when it comes, unless educators are pushing for tools that are specifically going to be for educational purposes, then that can be a whole different discussion. Because you'd be looking for people, let's say the OpenAI guys, make us tools that can be used by educators. So when they're making those, it's possible for them to have those in mind. But who's going to spend billions of dollars to actually venture into a product that is going to educators, and will they bring money back? So there's also that issue. People would care about your privacy and most of the things you like if you're willing to have donors and people put money into it. But if that's not the case, then commercial interest will always take center stage. And for those kind of technologies, you always have regulation come way later when the harm has already been done. So sadly, it's a give or take kind of situation, if that answers your question.
It does. It does. Thank you so much for that. And before we move on to collaboration, as I had mentioned earlier, before I come to Dr. Maina for that, I would like to ask Thaddeus, when we look at the bigger picture and how AI can, or more specifically, the power of big data and predictive analytics can help us to create more student-centered and student-driven educational experiences and personalize those experiences for them. What are some of the practical ways we can ensure that students are benefiting from all of that? Like, how can we personalize that experience for the student? How can the student actually benefit from integrating AI into their learning? Let us talk from the student's perspective, because I feel like the whole night we have not talked about the main character, who is the student. So Thaddeus.
Thank you, Jay. Now, and that is the most interesting part that we need to discuss, and that's what interests me. You know, that is what we call learner-centered approach of pedagogy. Now, when it comes to digital space or e-learning or online learning, then we need to ask ourselves, you know, in the physical learning, most of the time, even if we push for learner-centered approach where we let the learner drive everything, and that's why we bring in CBC, but it's not holistic, or sometimes we don't even achieve it. But how do we do it in the online space? And that is where technology, just to say AI, comes in. And that's why I say the only thing that is needed is that if we are developing tools, if we are developing interfaces for learning, we're using softwares, we're using hardware, be it a computer, mobile phone that is meant for the learner, then we need to gather the characteristics of the learner. That is the driving force, because the learner is developing in mind. So they have unique characteristics. That's why we say, even when we put levels of a learner, when you say grade 1, grade 2, what do you mean? What distinguishes grade 1 from grade 2? Just to say, it is their cognitive characteristics, the way you bring in the content to that learner. So, and I say sometimes, and that's where we say what we need in this space of education is that sometimes as human beings, we do make errors. That's why even when we say in the banking area where we see cashiers, sometimes they can count wrongly. That's why we have a teller using a machine to count the coins. What happens? Sometimes you can get even an educator who has some stress, who has some personal issues when they're learning. So they might not give exactly everything to that learner. The learner could not be having any problem. So what we say is that, are we able to say these are the characteristics of the learner, so that we tell the machine, we tell the robot, we tell the software, what we call AI, because AI are all those things, this is what exactly happens. Suppose I give something else and the learner predict well. Can the learner learn from what I've told that software? Then we say the first thing in all this is just to apply the characteristics of the learner. And those are the learning styles. So that we say instructionally, the way we do it, we are based on, if you do an instructional design of a content in a given domain, for example, we are saying Form 4 or students, just to speak, you sit down and draw that curricula. Can an AI do the same if assuming that you are correctly doing it, such that next time the AI can tell us, you know what, from what you have given this learner in Form 4, we predict that in university level or in college level, this should be the first fundamental skills that we need to give this learner. Now, then you as an educator, you can develop such kind of skills as you move forward. So every time is AI telling you this, then as a feedback, then you change that. It informs you, it enables you to move fast and change things as you move along. So what I'm just simply saying is, we develop content, we develop the curriculum based on the learning style characteristics. And most importantly, and this element is really, really missing in our learning interfaces in technological AI enabled, the cognitive load aspect. Learners get tired, and that's why why do we have, for example, breaks? Why do you have breaks? Like you say, the timetable for grade 1 is they learn from 7 up to 8. Then from 7:30 to this, they have a break, they go play a little bit and come back. That's what we were saying. So that can the AI provide that in the e-learning platform or online platform? Yes, it can. So it learns from what we do because artificial intelligence emulates the human thinking, but is not a human, right? So that one does not really mean that as it learns, we are going to become fools. No, we are always intelligent, and the only person in this world who is intelligent is a human being. That's why we call these machines or AI artificial. So in short, I'm just simply saying yes. What we need to do is the characteristic of the learner must be pivotal when you are thinking about integrating artificial intelligence in learning. And that's why we are saying there's research that is going on, and we need to have this discussion as beyond again as we go ahead, that we need to speak more to the policymakers, as the last speaker has just spoken, about how we can involve these educators making when it comes to digital space. Because remember, as IT experts who develop these solutions, they are not experts in these domain areas. That is for sure. So we need to, it's like when you're developing a solution, just to say simplistically, like for example, when you want to develop a solution, you don't, as an IT person or a computer scientist, you don't just wake up in the morning and start developing a solution. You look for a problem or an opportunity if you want to make money, then you go down and do what we call requirement collections. You collect requirements so that you just say, which color, for example, do you like? Then someone says red on this, and then you take statistics and you say, I think if I can develop a WhatsApp, then the interface that best suits these people in this region could be, or globally, statistically, is a color that looks like green. So we don't wake up and develop a solution for ourselves. We develop a solution for the consumer. And that's why consumers being learners, we have to say that what are the characteristics of the learners? So that is what we say learner-centered approach. So that we say, when we have an e-learning, an online platform that is AI-enabled, let AI learn from what the educators are saying are the characteristics of the learner. I want to give a very good example. If, for example, we are going to have, like what happened in COVID-19, for the learners. Actually, what we had are just enablers tools. For example, mostly from the previous research, we saw that Google Teams was the most highly used, but that word cannot say just it's a standalone a place for e-learning. It's only an enabler to achieve communication. That is it. But there's more about it. Like for example, if you say there's a tool like a big blue button that could enable us to have a mimic of a blackboard, for example, could have somewhere you could have a chalk, could have a board, then you scribble and write something, and as you speak and someone else sees your camera, that is not really even complete. We cannot say we have a classroom that is virtual. No, there's more to that. Because what physical learning dictates is like, even when you're in a classroom, you can just sense the characteristic of the learners and say, you know what, even if it's supposed to be 2 hours, these learners are tired. That's a characteristic identification for a human being's intelligence. Now, can a machine do that? Yes, we can. We need to have a machine that should be able to emulate you as a person when we're in the digital space, so that it can give you a support, give you a break, and also at the same time tells you, for example, these are the exercises that you can go through, and even help you do some exercises to help you achieve the other level of the domain. So what you're saying is that in a nutshell, as policymakers, like for example, the Kenya Curriculum Education, the Curriculum Development Institute, and education policymakers, we need to have a different paradigm shifter. In fact, I call it, like if you want to integrate AI in learning, then we have to say it must be learner-centered. And that's what developed countries are doing. So learner-centered in the sense that let that AI agent learn what are the characteristics and even change the same educator is doing in the classroom. And we can always integrate that, and we can always test whether that is working. Like the last speaker spoke about, we need to know what this AI is doing. How do we know that? Those are what we call at the initial stages of data or requirements collections. So you tell the AI or you tell these developers, I need this A, B, C, D as the requirements. And this is what the theory says. This is what the policy says. So the work of the developers is to implement what you are speaking about. So I want us to shift the discussion, not from just saying we need to have this. No, those things can be done. The policies can be done. And then can we change the whole narrative, like this is what we do in physical, we need to have it in a machine related approach, so that without changing anything. Because what I want to say is that we always say, for example, as developers, they also have caveats. They follow law, they follow their international law, their standards. You cannot develop an AI tool and start deploying to a mass of people. Maybe you want to destroy the whole community. So don't shy off from this. Even the government policies are there. And that's why, for example, we have now in Kenya, a data privacy and data privacy commission installed, and we are paying tax on the same, so that everything is taken care of. We have specialized, highly qualified, internationally professionals who work. So we can always say that on our things we should not worry about the same, but are we really the givers of our requirements as educators in policies? So that we need to be there in the change of the curriculum. And then as experts, we just interpret what you are saying from the physical environment. And again, we have educators who IT professionals, and that we say you're not alone. For example, if you don't have technology skills as a professional, we have people who have multiple such skills, and we have people who can interpret what we are talking about. So what I'm simply saying is that yes, learner-centered is the approach. Whether we are talking about physical learning or we are talking about e-learning, we need to talk about the characteristics of the learner, and it has to take center stage, because that is what we call CBC, and CPC is driving us to even learn from what that young young adult or these CPC learners are trying to. Sometimes you look at even what they try to. You give them a piece of paper and say, can you, for example, develop an aeroplane from that? As they are doing that development of aeroplane, can a machine be able to learn from that child and try to maybe provide some support? That's what we're speaking about when it comes to artificial intelligence. So it's a continual process of discussion that can take space. And I thank you for this time that we need to talk, even another fora, and take center stage in educational curriculum development, and you speak more on not just saying, where is our data, where is this? Yes, this one we know, we can talk about it, but the domain area and the way of learning must be what we should be speaking now. And can the machine do exactly the way we do it in physical? Not just to say exactly, but we say as the norm is in physical, and that's what we call emulating human beings, artificial intelligence.
Thank you so much, Mr. Thaddeus. And I think the one common the bottom line we are looking at is focus on the learner, focus on who you're teaching, who you're educating, as opposed to what you are, or the content that, yes, the content will be considered, but the first focus should be who am I implementing this to? And I'd like to bring back and maybe put this on Dr. Miner and Dr. Christine. I know you've had conversations regarding this and surrounding this. Yes, when it comes to education as a whole, it has to be in one or the other rigid, because we're looking at how we are able to instill a few competencies to the kids. But then when we look at the educators themselves, and now the education managers, right? I know, Dr. Christine, you asked about policy, and last year we had a very, I wouldn't want to say the word controversial, but that came about. There was a bill that was presented that was seeking to regulate AI and robotics in the country. I'm pretty sure it's also in discussion at the moment or something of the sort. But then the one thing becomes, are we involving, when it comes to the policymakers, are we really looking at guys who are in the front line, the ones who are aware? Because from what I'm gathering, based on the conversations that we are having, the one thing we need is, we need all the key players there, and we need to put ourselves in the shoes of even the learner. So maybe this one I will in one or the other invite. And Makia, yes, I saw your hand was up, but then maybe in 2 minutes each, Dr. Minor, Dr. Christine, you can give us the aspect of, yes, we have the different agencies, the belongings and all that we need to consider when it comes to both the learner and the educator. But now where AI is concerned, and Dr. Minor, you also say that as Kenya, we are playing catch up. Right now that we are looking to switch to CBC from 844, how is it that we can take advantage of this switch from to CBC and be able to come up with the AI tools or AI educational enablers as we are having this going round? In one or the other, we stop playing catch up and we actually be at par. Right now is when we are fully implementing STEM to majority of our schools. Other schools have already gone to stream in coming up with even research and robotics in that. So how are we able to, one, consider the learner? Maybe Dr. Minor, you can have us look at that, and then Dr. Christine, you can have us look at the educator, and then collectively we can look at education managers, how we able to ensure that there is that equity. In 2 minutes, kindly, Dr. Minor.
Thank you very much. And I like how the discussion is unfolding. We talk of competency-based curriculum as a curriculum which empowers the learners in terms of ownership and authorship of the learning experiences. And if we are supposed to empower this learner so that they don't just consume what is prescribed, but they are able to authoritatively prosume and make meaning of this knowledge to the required standards. Then, as we have said, the issue of values are not taught, but they are caught or nurtured. They need to understand, or they need to be made aware of how the availability of these tools and how they can use them in an ethical manner, and how they can use them as a scaffold or as a support, as an assistant to be an enabler. Because if you find the way the CBC is designed, the content is given, but there is opportunities because of bringing on board individualism. There's an opportunity for differentiation based on how the curriculum instructional design is made, so that the content is the same, but the learners, based on, and I know Makias also gave that example, the learners consume it in their own learning styles, and they come up with products or solutions of how they have consumed that content to a concept level in their own ways, which is informed by either their exposure, their experience, or their learning style. So there should be that space of whereby students are empowered from a point of view that you are using this to make you efficient, to make you access a multiple perspective, so that by the time you are taking a standpoint, you've been able to access evidence and you have a deeper meaning of that particular concept which you are presenting. And you find that through technology, collaborative work is coming on board, because most of the time in competence-based curriculum, learners are given a project to work across board. So if we are 5 students and we are working in a project, how will you know the contribution of an individual within that particular project? AI is able to do that. And at the end of this particular project, it can be able to assess who contributed what and what was their level of commitment. Because another thing which we don't appreciate in this sphere of learning is the effort the learners are putting. We are just product-based, and that is a shortfall, because learning is procedural. So if the parameters of performance and success can be driven to a level of looking at the effort, then that can give an opportunities for us to appreciate learner. That's why in other curriculums, you're told submit first draft, you're given a feedback, then give the second draft. Then whatever you get, you're given an opportunity to review based on the rubric which you are given, so that you can reach a particular standard which is required. So some people will reach by the first trial, some people will reach by 2 trials, others by 3 trials. But at the end of the day, all learners have been able to achieve that performance in their individual pathways. And hence, AI for students, it creates an opportunity for adaptive learning platform, because the first attempt, if I'm using an interface, it will be able to give me the skills gap that I'm having, and it might even suggest what I need to do to be able to cover or to reach there. And because of that personalized feedback, that very safe environment where I'm getting this guidance, as a student, I will not be comparing myself with another student. I'll be using what we call assertive assessment, whereby I'm comparing my performance with my previous performance. And therefore, I have an opportunity to grow at my own pace towards the required standard, but at my own pace. So feedback and feed forward, as you're saying, is very key. But bottom line is the reflection. Because with AI, the kind of information that it will give us, it will allow the person interfacing with it to reflect on what does it mean to my learning experience. What is it that I need to change? How am I approaching the required standard? What kind of resources do I need to be able to be there? So it gives you tools, it gives you resources, it gives you opportunity for remediation, so that you can be able to bridge that gap towards the expected performance. So I'll say for learners, it is very critical, but again, I'll put a disclaimer that they need to have an ethical approach on how they interact with the tools. Because the moment you present the tools work as your work, then you are not interfacing yourself with what the tool is scaffolding you to do. And then you are losing your face, you are losing your ownership, you are losing your authorship. CBC is about ownership and authorship of learning. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. I think I should just pick it up from there. Just to talk about educators, because they are also very critical. It is clear that the synergy between AI and the competency-based curriculum holds potential possibilities for transforming education. And at the center of this transformation, of course, the educator is there. By integrating AI into CBC, we stand on a cusp of creating more personalized, engaging, and effective learning environments that cater for the diverse needs of the different educators. Because if we are talking about moving with the way technology is moving, then the educators must have a growth mindset to embrace the fact that AI is here with us, the learners are here with us. We have to inculcate the right values, we have to inculcate the right ethical aspects of learning. We have to ensure that our learners are catching the values, as Dr. Maina has said, and they are getting the right competencies, the right skills as they continue with learning. And so this journey is, of course, not without challenges, including what we've already discussed about, and professional development for the educators. It is such a challenge because we don't have so many people who are experts in the line of AI, and the number of educators we have in the world or in the country are many. And to be able to have these educators all come to an agreement that this is it, AI is here, we all are positive about it, we are moving forward. It is imperative that we approach the integration of AI into education with a balanced perspective, acknowledging both its potential and its limitations. So the educators, as they go about building their capacity. It is important for them, or rather for us, to embrace innovation with a critical eye, ensuring that we remain steadfast in our commitment to preparing learners not just to succeed in the digital age, but to thrive as compassionate, critical thinking members of course, the global society. And at the center, the educator is there as a role model. Remember, the future of education is not AI replacing the educators, but augmenting and enhancing the human touch that is the cornerstone of effective learning. So forging partnerships between the educators, technologists, policymakers, name them, we can navigate these complexities of this time to ensure that everybody is having a balanced view of what needs to be done and how it has to be done for us to really get the full benefits of learning, especially because we are talking about our learners, we are talking about the future. If we don't do it now, then we are going to have a challenge in the future. And that is what basically Education for Sustainable Development is arguing about, taking care of the future. So the educator must have a growth mindset, must be ready to learn, must be open-minded to embrace what is there, and also to be ready to learn, to partner with the people who already know, for them to be able to do things right. I don't want to take a lot of time because I want to go away. Please let me stop there.
Thank you so much, Dr. Christine. We're actually coming to a close. And thank you so much for actually talking on collaboration and what the future looks like as far as AI and education is concerned. And I'd like to invite everybody to give their closing remarks. You can touch on those aspects as well, collaboration and what the future holds. So I think we'll begin with Makia and then Thaddeus and then Dr. Maina. We do not have comments tonight, and I have been unsuccessful at accepting some of the other requests from our listeners. Beth, I have been trying all night. My apologies. And Dr. Maina, I would love, there's a comment actually that was requesting for you to repeat, to repeat the 4 tools on critical thinking. So maybe if you could do that, that would be very much appreciated. But give us your closing remarks. Makia, it's your turn.
Thank you. I just wanted to quickly comment on something that we mentioned about having not student-centered sort of learning. Now, when it comes to AI, student-centered is actually quite different because you do not know what needs you'd probably get out of AI, because AI relies on one thing: patterns and data. So it's actually for the educator or the instructor to actually prescribe what goals they're trying to achieve, and then out of that, the AI sort of learning tools would be able to present data to actually either nullify or prove the hypothesis you actually have in place, or objective you want to achieve, it's actually true or false. So I do not know if it would be possible to actually have AI be student centered, because at the end of the day, there are competing needs, out here. What you'd want to achieve is probably how would be able to make the best out of AI. Because I remember in high school, I actually had a teacher who could, go print, specific parts of the brain. Back then, you couldn't really access, 3D sort of tools. So I wasn't in a school where you'd have LED screens or things like that. But he was actually able to print those documents in, almost 5 ways to just give us that sort of experience. So at the end of the day, it's actually the role of educators to decide what sort of way in which students would actually interact with AI. Because at the end of the day, also, let's remember this: AI is not really about even the students using it. For me, look at it as more of a teacher making the best out of this to actually enhance learning. For example, if you'd realize you'd want to teach grammar, The AI tools out there, others teach British sort of style of writing English, others would go Australian, others would go Canadian, others would go the US. So which one would you want to pick at the end of the day? So would you want your students to actually get to learn maybe writing English, but in a more British way? So most of those discussions actually make it a bit hard. So for example, if let's say you want to use Grammarly as an example to have some of your students write essays and it's able to spell check and things like that. I mean, what is the intended outcome as an instructor and as a teacher would you want to have? So at the end of the day, I think the biggest deal for me is most learners would actually have the power of how these AI is going to affect them solely reliant on their teachers. Because for me, I do not really think the biggest work either the Ministry of Education or anyone should do right now is have learners go ahead and maybe use these. It's more of, can we have teachers understand how these tools can be used, create very good objectives and goals, and get to have those people who are students get to get the benefit. The student does not know beforehand what AI can do for them. The teacher is the one who has the curriculum, has the coursework. These are the people who need to use these tools, and then they can tailor make that experience for the student. So my closing shot on this would be, if you want to have student-centered AI, because AI knows one thing, to collect data patterns, give you those feedback. It's upon the teachers to actually decide how AI is going to be student-centered for the needs of their own students. I think maybe there's more to say, but in the respect of time, I'll leave it at that.
Thank you so much, Makia. Thaddeus?
Thank you. In fact, I'll just exactly pick from where Makia speak has just talked, and I want to elaborate and say, as an expert on this part, what exactly Makia is saying is opposite of what we want to endeavor on. So he's just trying to say that it should be teacher-centered, and we are running away from that. It should be learner-centered. And when we say about learner-centered, the AI tools that we have, the interfaces that we create, can perfectly, from those patterns and the data that we have, can perfectly learn from the learner behavior and provide scaffolding, provide a support, and even give a feedback to the teacher or educator saying, this learner is performing like this, you can change the intuition or anything else. And this speaks to one thing as towards the closing remarks. Where we are right now, we are talking about adaptive learning. So if we are really talking about adaptive learning, which at times we call personalized learning, through the enabling technology of AI, then we put the learner at the center. Then when we say if we're putting the learner at the center, even if the educator, the teacher is providing that content, already the teacher knows the scope of that learner. So the AI tool is going to learn what really is the goal, the learning objective, for example, for that course domain that the learner is supposed to learn. And as the learner is provided that content from even the beginning, the AI is also gathering data from the behavior of learners and try to support the learner at real time or at any given time. I want to give an example. Why do we even, for example, see schools giving tuitions? So that the remedials, and we pay for that. It's because there are learners whose pace of learning is different from the others. So can the AI tools be able to do that? Perfectly, yes. Because what happens is that the teacher defines this scope, that this is what, at the end of the day, in this domain, in this grade, this is what we want. This is the exercises. The learner, the AI can give different exercises, interact with the learner, which is really, really achievable. And that's what I'm saying, that we have to say that we have. One of the tools that is really existing, and I have to say it at this juncture, is what we call a learning management system. And there is an active research that we are doing on the same in Kenyan universities currently, and we have already the results, and we are trying to analyze the results, which is even supposed to be published. We are looking at what we are calling, for example, and it's based on a different perspective because the learning styles for university students and YK12 is different. And this one was specifically for university students, as we say, for example. Though we can have a mirror of the same, we're trying to say from the interactions. Can the learning management system, which does it exist? Like, for example, you've heard about the tools called Moodle. Moodle has what we call AI algorithms built in, and even others that you can patch in there. And as you interact with that learning management system, we can harvest characteristic of the learner in terms of the logs in the database. And at the end of the day, the content that we give, the AI within the Moodle can give directions, support, feedback back, and even forward to the learner. But specifically, what drives the entire thing is what the way the
Thaddeus?
learner is supposed to behave. Yes, please. So what I'm
Thaddeus,
saying is,
my apologies, and I hate to cut you short, but probably we
yes,
can invite you next time to cover some of these topics. But we
yes,
really do
please.
need to start closing. Yes.
Please do. Please. So what I'm saying is that yes, it's possible. Let's have AI on this space, and it's really part of where we are going and where we can lead as a country in an education sector. Thank you for the same.
Thank you so much for that. Dr. Christine, I know you had already said your goodbyes, but maybe you can just say good night once again, and then we move on to Dr. Maina, who can lead us to the close of this conversation.
I think I am in agreement with all that we've shared, and I believe that the educators who have followed this conversation are going to take it forward so that the policymakers can get to know that there is a conversation going on, and they should be able to pick it up and run with it and do what is necessary for everybody to embrace, if possible, embrace AI and use it in the right manner. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Dr. Maina, please remind us of the four, what were they? The four critical thinking tools. And then you can also give us your closing remarks on this.
Abilities. So other critical thinking and problem solving has 4 abilities. And the first one is multiple perspectives. And the second one is being able to assess evidence. The third one is about deep structures. And the fourth one is non-routine. So if you are able to demonstrate these, and these are what we use to assess if somebody is a critical thinker based on these 4 attributes. So in my closing remark, I'll say we go back to basic, and I like what Thaddeus is talking about. We ask ourselves, what is learning? And how does learning happen? Because that will really, really inform how we interact with the content which is provided by Kenya Institute of Curriculum Development, and the aspired concepts which are required to be attained by the learners after going through the content. So AI will be the bridge between content and concept, because it is that ability to contextualize the content and create or construct a learning experience which is meaningful to the learners so that they can be able to conceptualize what they are learning. So AI will play between the 2 C's of contextualization and construction, and content is already provided, and concept is what remains with you after you leave school. So we need to go back to basic and ask ourselves, what is learning and how do learners learn? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Maina. And asanteni sana to everybody who made it to this conversation tonight. Thank you to our speakers who honored us with their time. We really, really appreciate that. And remember that education is, we can never exhaust this conversation. So we will always be inviting you guys to come back so that we can continue the conversation and explore even other aspects of education that we need to be looking at. I have been your host. Well, I have been your host, Jay Shiko. And I look forward to doing this again next week, same time, Wednesday, 8 p.m. East African time. And I think I'll give it over to Grace to close it for us. But thank you so much, and good morning, good evening. Sorry, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're listening in from. Thank you. Grace?
Well, thank you very much, and a very, very big thank you to all who have been with us from the start. Like Jay Shiko has said, yes, this is a conversation that we cannot exhaust, and I really look forward to us continuing to delve deeper into this. And again, apologies for taking it 4 minutes past the hour. Well, now 5. I'm looking at next week. We'll have it, and we are going to be still looking at AI CBC, but now we are going to be looking at the different agencies that we have. We have agency belonging, and I'm pretty sure Dr. Minor will be. I would really love to hear your thoughts on this as well. Again, I want to wish